26. Hmm. Hi.
I'm
Good.
a little slow getting my act together here.
I know it's just, is it just us or
Ah,
where is everybody?
I think we may have to face facts here in the not too distant future. It's just
Mm,
dwindling. Maybe it's
really?
because, maybe it's because
Mm,
I remember when I first started, how many people there were, and
right, right. Hmm. Mm,
slowly they've been ticking off week by week. But maybe
mm,
it's because it's summertime,
mm,
people went back to work.
mm,
I can't say. I can't say.
mm,
Well, she
mm.
wanted to talk about it because of her going, her Bettina, going to Germany for those few
Yeah,
weeks in the fall.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm flexible, I could go on hiatus. That'd be okay. Or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, could do guided meditation if
Mm-hmm.
there, if there's enough of us that want to do that. I'm pretty flexible. I'm willing to kind of go with the flow.
Hi.
People are feeling
Yeah.
like,
Hi,
so we'll see.
Bettina. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, let me turn my fan on. Boy, this humidity is something else.
yeah.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi, how are you?
I'm pretty well.
Good.
Going for you?
What?
How's it going for you?
It's going okay. It's going okay. I'm doing better. Um, uh, Walking around my house without anything. Um, and um, I'm feeling better. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. That's really
I mean, not
amazing.
perfect, but better.
Okay, but you're walking now.
I'm walking more. Yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
without anything outside, I'm using a cane, but I'm not
Mm-hmm.
using a walker. And, you know, yeah, so there's been a lot of improvements. The last couple of days, I don't feel great for some reason. I'm not sure why, but
Mm-hmm.
other
In
than
your
that,
body? In your body?
in my body, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, in my body.
Yeah.
Your
Like some of
energy
the,
level is so much elevated, Lauren.
yeah,
It
yeah,
really is. You were sitting back,
right.
into now you're forward, and your facial color is so much better, and
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you look elevated. I think just the rain, the low pressure,
Mm,
affects all of us because we
yeah,
don't get it very often here. So
it could be. It really, I thought
could
about
be
that
contributing.
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
we
Hi,
just don't
Z.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know if Z can hear us. Can you hear us, Z? Oh, you can? You
Yeah.
can. Okay. I think this was likely going to be our group because Bruce has a relative in town
Hmm.
and Mike hasn't joined us in a few weeks. And so that's going to be on the agenda also tonight about how to move forward during this time or
Hmm.
if we need to take a sabbatical. So we'll talk about that a little bit today. We'll see when we can find a nice find nice timing in these 2 hours to fit it in.
Mhm.
But for now, or rather, and for now, we'll just spend this time to talk about non-self. We have already touched on it last time, and in particular, the topic of the evening will be dukkha, non-self, and I'll go into the different translations of dukkha in a little while. But I know that all of us here are familiar, obviously, with it. We're all on the path. And the meditation that I guided last week just very spontaneously seemed to lead in that direction. So I have decided to sort of go a little bit deeper with that today. And I know that at least for myself, it took me really several years, maybe more than a decade, to really even just begin to get a real experiential understanding of non-self. So it's not a topic that's usually talked about in the first class. Although I have to admit, when I started on my Buddhist path, I started at a Mahayana temple, which is supposed to be the Mahayana, the more elevated, or advanced teachings of Buddhism. So I felt like in many ways that I started with a PhD in Buddhism and really didn't understand much in the beginning, and then made my way back to the very beginnings where I feel more comfortable with the Four Noble Truth and so forth. But I can see after all those years how the teachings really come together after some time, and especially after practicing and experiencing them and not just hearing the words. So we'll have a talk, and then we'll have a guided movement and a guided sit. And then in the second hour, we're going to actually read the sutta on non-self, the spoken words of the Buddha. And we will then, if there's still time, have a council practice about it. But we'll be cognizant about the fact that we do want to talk about, get everybody's view on what to do in these upcoming weeks with the class. So we'll leave room for that. But I just very recently found out from myself that, well, actually, I did know that the Buddha, after his enlightenment, did not begin to teach right away, but I didn't really know that for about 7 weeks or so after his full enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he actually spent another maybe 7 weeks or so just contemplating if he should even teach at all, because it seemed like what he had realized was not something that could be easily passed on to anybody else. So he really struggled with that for those weeks until, as the story goes, a deva came down from the heavens and basically implored the Buddha to teach this stuff, as we say in modern terms, and really said that the deva supposedly said that there's enough people with a little bit of dust in their eyes, meaning there's enough people who have the seed of awakening in them enough so that if they hear the teachings of the Buddha, they will be able to awaken just like the Buddha did. So with that inspiration, the Buddha then actually went out and away from the Bodhi tree into the world. And what he actually did is he looked for his 5 spiritual friends that he had practiced with for about 6 years before his enlightenment. And probably all of you know, or most of you know, is that he eventually separated from these other ascetics that he found in the forests of India when he discovered the middle path and didn't want to participate in the very, very sort of radical practices of starving himself and so forth. So he had separated from that group, but then sought out to find them again after his enlightenment. And so those were the first 5 people that the Buddha, after his enlightenment, gave his first discourse, his first teachings to. And the first one, as most of you know, was actually called the Setting the Wheel of Dharma in Motion, which was basically an expression of of his enlightenment that he had just achieved. And it is said that after hearing the first discourse, that all 5 friends of his basically became stream enterers after listening to the talk. And just to a very loose definition of stream enterer, if you're not familiar, just could be someone who has stepped on the path. I know that is not 100% correct, but just for simplification, somebody who has stepped on the path and has embraced the teachings and follows the teachings is a stream enterer. And then interestingly, and this is what I would like for us to read together in the second half, and I would like to give a little introduction about at this time, is that the second discourse that the Buddha actually gave was called the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, which is the discourse on non-self given by the Buddha. And it is said that after listening to this particular discourse on non-self, all 5 friends became fully enlightened, just like the Buddha. So it shows the benefit of having been around during the Buddha's time, that, you know, just hearing one teaching that, or in this case, the second teaching. So 2 teachings it only took for these 5 spiritual friends on the path to become fully enlightened, just like the Buddha. And I think it also really points out just how much at the heart of the Buddha's teaching obviously is this teaching of non-self, that it was already in the second teaching that he ever gave, that he spoke about it in detail. And unlike the teachings of maybe impermanence and suffering, dukkha, which are somewhat easy to understand, or easier to understand for several reasons that I don't want to really spend more time going into today, but the teachings on non-self are rather counterintuitive to our everyday common sense understanding of who we are and how we live in the world. And if you think about it, just even from a language standpoint, from using language, the I as a subject is really at the center of how we define ourselves to be. Like there's an I, there's a self-reference from which we basically experience everything from this self, from this I, is what experiences everything from a language point of view as well. So it's quite counterintuitive to speak about non-self. So this word dukkha, or suffering, I know all of us are familiar with right from the get-go. When the Buddha taught the 4 Noble Truths, they all center around dukkha, around suffering, you know, the existence of suffering, causes of suffering, the end of suffering, and then the path to reach the end of dukkha, or the end of suffering. So it's quite at the center of the Buddha's teachings as well. So in order to really group them together, dukkha and non-self, it's really important to go and understand the meaning of this word dukkha. As I already mentioned, and as all of you know, it's most often translated as suffering or pain and discomfort. That, you know, the kind of suffering that can arise both in the body and in the mind. But what is really noteworthy here is that the Buddha stated that all conditioned experience, which means everything we experience, is suffering. So all conditioned experience, which means everything we experience, is suffering. And that is not something that can be easily understood. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit more, even if you're already familiar with what I'm going to share. And I suppose that is really true. What anything that Z and I have ever shared these last few months, we all have heard it in one way or another, but, you know, it's certainly, you know, it's worth repeating a lot of this stuff. So So then the question really is, how does dukkha relate to the experiences that we find pleasurable, enjoyable, and delightful? So here it's important that words other than suffering will give a more complete sense of what suffering means. So here words like unreliable or ultimately dissatisfying or insecure can help. And in this way, I mean, it's not really so difficult to see that even delights, pleasures can become, or are, as a matter of fact, unreliable because they're impermanent. You know, just very simple examples like enjoying an ice cream and really finding it ultimately pleasurable and delightful to eat this ice cream, but then at some point it finishes, or if you eat too much to it, the delight turns into a disease in the body, a discomfort or a pain in the tummy. So in that case, it becomes easier to understand how even something that seems enjoyable and delightful is ultimately also dukkha, or that dukkha is embedded in it rather. So really, again, it points to how all experiences are ultimately dissatisfying. Even though they satisfy us in the moment, they won't last. So that's the dukkha of even pleasurable experiences that the Buddha points here to. And so in listening and reading the sutta together in the second half this evening, we really want to have this really more expanded understanding of dukkha in order to understand the sutta better. And also that this understanding of dukkha is intimately related to the understanding of non-self. And so the key question that this night is going to revolve around is going to be basically, how does the unreliability of all conditioned things help us understand the teachings of non-self? How does the unreliability of all conditioned things help us understand the teachings of non-self? And first up is that when we see the relationship of dukkha to non-self, it opens a gateway to greater freedom in the mind, of greater freedom in the body, of greater awakening within ourselves. So for you who are not, I don't know if there's anyone who's not familiar or has never read an actual sutta, an actual discourse by the Buddha, but all of them basically start out in one way or another with, "Thus have I heard." And that is basically because in the Buddha's time that there was no written word, there was nothing written down yet, it wasn't invented yet. So the person who basically had this extraordinary memory was the Buddha's cousin, who was also one of his disciples. His name was Ananda. And whenever the Buddha gave a teaching, a discourse, a sermon, Ananda basically was able to memorize the teachings of the Buddha and then pass them on to other people as well. And then that's how they got passed on to different or following generations until the suttas could actually be written down, or rather the words of the Buddha could actually be written down. So the sutta tonight also will start with, "Thus have I heard," meaning this is how Ananda heard the words of the Buddha, or remembers the words of the Buddha from that particular night. And so what the sutta basically revolves around is what is called either the 5 skandas in Sanskrit or the 5 khandas in Pali. And loosely translated, that basically means either the 5 characteristics or activities, or basically what makes up what we call the I, or the self, and which often then leads to our suffering because we think that these things are permanent or that we have control over them. I kind of like the translation of activity a little bit more than characteristic, because a characteristic seemed more solid to me than an activity that's more flowy and changes. But basically what the Buddha addresses here in the sutta as characteristics or activity or as skandas are form, or the body rather, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. So this is what the Buddha addresses really in this particular sutta on non-self. So in the sutta, the Buddha also addresses the two different aspects of dukkha, the two different aspects of suffering. And I'm going to go over them in a moment. I just want to name them. That the first aspect of dukkha are the physical elements / the body that lead to affliction. And I will also in a moment go over why these physical elements, or the body rather, lead to affliction. And then the second aspect of dukkha is that the physical elements or the body are unreliable. When I say or, I mean physical elements that make up the body, basically, so that the body is ungovernable. And again, I will explain more in a moment. But it's kind of, it makes sense, or it's easy to see that the body is ungovernable in the sense that the body is not subject to our will, which means that the body really follows its own natural laws. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, if you're into letting go, we don't have any control over the laws. We don't have any control over what the body's laws are and what the body decides to do with itself. So how then do these physical elements lead to affliction? Is that really true? And I put that in here as a question, is that really true? Because the Buddha always asked us or encouraged us to really explore for ourselves or experience for ourselves if whatever he had said or had offered as a teaching really feels true to us or rings true for us after we practice with it. So one afflictive nature of the body is the affliction of hunger and thirst. And here, at least I'm pretty sure, I feel pretty safe to say that at least in this group, we might not really be so much aware that hunger and thirst actually are an affliction of the body. And that is so because when we are hungry or we're thirsty, we can easily remedy this hunger and this thirst. You know, we just eat when we're hungry. Most of the time we have food readily available, or when we're thirsty, most of us carry a water bottle with us and we take a sip of water and we're no longer thirsty. But as we all know, that is really not the case for millions of people around the world that are either starving and being undernourished, or maybe even die from hunger and lack of water, or from contaminated water. So for those people, it is much more readily available, unfortunately or fortunately, to see that hunger and thirst is an affliction of the body. And so it's really worthy for us to do a little bit of an investigation about, or to rather question, or to rather stop and say, to see that we don't stop to think what's motivating us to eat and drink. We don't even question it. Hi, Gail. It's nice to see you. We've kind of already in the middle of the talk, fully into dukkha, or suffering, as you know, and non-self. So the talk is about that. And then we're going to actually, I'm just introducing a teaching of the Buddha on non-self right now that we're actually going to read together in the second hour. So if I apologize if you missed a lot of the.
I apologize for being late.
No, that's okay. So I just wanted to let you know what we're talking about. So we're saying
You're frozen on my screen,
we're
Bettina.
hungry, we just eat, but how that's not the case for millions of people around the world who are either undernourished or maybe even, starved to death. So for them, it's much more apparent that hunger and thirst is an affliction of the body. And so for most of us, though, we don't stop to think what's motivating us to eat and drink. And basically, if we sat down and meditated on that, it would become clear that what's motivating us is the feeling of suffering, the feeling of dis-ease, or the feeling of discomfort in the body when we're hungry or when we're feeling thirsty. There's a discomfort in the body that we feel. There's suffering that is created by that. So it might be a little bit easier for us to actually experience or to be more in touch with the afflictive nature of the body when we are sitting down in meditation, especially if we're meditating for a longer period of time and we find the necessity to change posture in the body because we experience pain or discomfort in the body. So we shift our posture around because of this affliction in the body that the Buddha talks about. And we realize, oh, there's pain in the body or there's discomfort in the body. And we begin to understand, oh, this body is painful. This body is uncomfortable. And we can experience that in all of the different postures that we can assume as a human being, standing, sitting, and lying down. We will all find out that if we sit or stand or lie down for long periods of time, the body will begin to feel uncomfortable, or the body might even have pain. Or for some of us, we don't even need to lie down, or the body, the pain is already there. So in that sense, it might be easier for us to connect with the fact that the body, there's an affliction in the body. So I wanted to add to that we oftentimes move the body, and that the movement is oftentimes to obscure dukkha. So for example, like I already said, in meditation, we move the body because we're beginning to feel uncomfortable in meditation in our posture. So we move the body quickly, or we move however we move in order for there to no longer be discomfort. So in that way, it actually obscures the dukkha in that moment. It disguises itself because we move the body, and then at least temporarily the dukkha or the suffering is no longer there. So it's basically how the movement becomes a distraction from us experiencing the dukkha in the body. So an important inquiry as a meditator might be, whenever we move, what motivates the movement? Whenever we move, what motivates the movement? And if you really take that in as an investigation, you'll most likely find out that a great part of the time that we move to alleviate discomfort or pain in the body. So just wanted to go over quickly also over the second aspect of dukkha, or the second affliction of the body, which is that the body is ungovernable. And I think that also becomes clear when we take in that most of us would prefer for our bodies not to get sick or ill, or would prefer for our body not to age too much more, or prefer for, we would choose to be alive rather than to be dead. But just exactly because of the nature of the body being ungovernable, we really don't have any say over it. The body decides for itself. And here it's really important to take in that that is not chaotic. The fact that we are subject to illness, aging, and death doesn't represent that something is terribly wrong, but rather that the body follows its own laws, like I already stated before, and that unfortunately to us, we haven't made those laws. So in that sense, it is ungovernable. It's out of our control. So it's really important that as practitioners, we reflect on this nature of the body. And this also applies to the other khandhas, or the other characteristics or activities that the Buddha talks about in the sutra. So it doesn't just relate to the body, but also to the mental aspects, that the afflictive nature of the mental aspects, the afflictive nature of feelings, for example, that, you know, if we feel angry or sorrowful, or we feel in a way that makes us uncomfortable, and we wish, oh, I wish this fear would already go away, but then we realize, no, it just shows up when it shows up. The anger just shows up when it shows up, and we really don't have any say over it. We might be able to practice with it, but the initial arising of anger, we have very little say over, or no say over. So in that sense, even the mental aspects of our being are ungovernable, are out of our control, without our reach, past our reach. So really helpful here to remember that this is not a mistake, that we're not doing anything wrong. It's just a law of nature, that the body and the mental afflictions are out of our control. And the Buddha offered this phrase for us to take in that context as it relates to the body and the mind, when he says that this is not mine, this is not I, this is not myself. So the last part about the sutta that I wanted to briefly touch on is the question then, well, what's an appropriate response to this truth of the body being of this afflictive nature, of something that we can control? And the teaching that the Buddha offered here in that respect was that he said, whatever is not yours, abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness. Whatever is not yours, abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness. So just wanted to point out here that abandoning in this case doesn't mean ignoring the body or ignoring the feelings, not taking care of it, not taking care of the feelings, not taking care of the body, but rather it means to abandon your identification with it. This feeling that this feeling is me, or this body is me, this is myself, this is I. He asks us to abandon the identification with the body, the identification with the feelings, the perceptions, the mental formations, and the consciousness, and to not be attached to it. So let's just close our eyes for a moment and just let these words settle down. And then when Z is ready, we'll spend a little time moving together to obscure the, the reality of dukkha. So.
I wanted to maybe do a couple of exercises, and you can stand if you're feeling like you've been sitting so long that you want to stand, but we don't have to stand just yet. So I just want to invite you to close your eyes, and I'm going to ask you not to hold your breath, but also to not try to breathe in any way. And now I'm going to ask you to become aware of the temperature. Noticing if the skin feels any sense of heat or cool, but also inside. Then also see if you can connect with your heart beating. Might help to put a hand on your heart if you don't just not normally feel it from within. And see if you have eaten at any time recently, if you're aware of the digesting that's happening in your body. Or perhaps aware of sensation relating to be hungry or satiated, or perhaps even full. And notice if there's any sense of thirst or not. And if that sense is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And then finally feel the sensations in the body, the sensations from sitting. And just taking in how none of this are we in control of. And then let the chin come down to the chest. And now as we move, we can start to notice how something that we purposefully do does create a response in the body. There's a sensation associated with what we do. And just notice if the sense of self is more or less as we start to circle the head around and you become the doer of that motion and therefore feel like you're the creator of the sensation in response to the emotion. Whenever you're ready, you can circle the head the other way. Perhaps still being in touch with the ungovernability that you can cause your head to move, but only to a certain degree, and the sensations that are produced are not your choice. And then find your way back and place the hands on the shoulders with the fingers pointing forward. And make big circles around in the air with the elbows. And just notice if the movement impacts your breathing at all, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And again, you're welcome to stand as we start to move a little bit more or stay sitting. We are going to sit after this, so your body might appreciate standing, but you're welcome to stay sitting. And then we'll let the hands rest and the shoulders relax. And step the feet a little wider apart than hip width if you're standing. And bring the arms out to the side and then bend the elbows like cactus arms. And then if you are standing, let the knees bend a little bit. We're going to start to move rapidly and breathe rapidly. So now it's going to be all about the control of coordinating the movement and the breath. And we exhale as we turn. We inhale through center. We don't stop, and we exhale. And we do it fast. So it's a real like staccato breath. Letting your eyes wrap around behind you. And come to center, inhale, bring the arms up. Maybe interlace the fingers and hold the breath. And pull up from the base of the spine, pull up from the navel, pull up from the throat, press the tongue to the roof of the mouth, roll the eyes up to the crown of the head. Hold the breath as long as you can. When you need to exhale, release the arms down. Noting perhaps how you don't have control over how long you can hold your breath. At the point, you need to let the breath go. And then just taking in the sensations. And then we'll move the spine a different way now. Again, with the bend in the knees, if you are standing, or stay sitting if you prefer. And then open the arms out to the side, sending the chest up and the eyes up. And then as you exhale, clasp the hands, press the palms forward, tuck the tailbone, tuck the chin, round your back. And then inhale, open again, send the chest forward, the eyes up. Bending the knees, rounding the back, tucking the tailbone, tucking the chin, pressing the palms forward. And then go at your own pace and really seeing how you can coordinate the movement with your breath. And then on your next exhale, just release the arms down. Stand or sit with the eyes closed. Maybe the palms will face forward. If you're standing, maybe feeling the feet on the ground. And we'll all just take in the sensations. Even though we may think that we created the sensations, we all did the same movement and none of our bodies feel like each other's. And then feel your feet and feel pretty much all the sensations as you move back to sitting. So like, for instance, I'm touching the table that my screen is on, and I feel the sensation of my hand on the wood. And then the contact that my body makes again with the seat. And then as you come into whatever your comfortable seated posture is, I will turn it over to Bettina.
So just allow yourself to settle into your seat. If you're comfortable, the eyes can softly close, or you can have a gentle gaze down in front of you. And perhaps you can still feel the sensations lingering in your body that were generated through the movement practice. And just a noting of what's here. Is there a tingling or vibrating, a heat or a cold? Maybe you don't even need to name, but just feel. Feel if it's pleasant or unpleasant, or rather neutral, whatever you're experiencing. And then just feel the heaviness of the body, the weight of the body as you're settling into your seat, settling into stillness as best as you can. And just being aware simply of the body sitting here, the body in a seated posture. And see if you can be aware of the body from head to toe, taking in the whole body as it's seated here. And you can be aware of the parts of the body that feel solid, that relate to the earth element, the bones in the body. So the skull, the neck bones, the shoulder bones, the breastbone. You can be aware of the spine in back of you. The sit bones, the hip bones, bones in the leg, and bones in the feet. This body made out of the earth element. And then connect for a time with the liquidity of the body, the water element. This body that is largely made out of the water element, all the different bodily liquids, the blood, the urine, the saliva, the pus, all that makes up the liquidity of the body, the water element. And then you can connect to the fire element as well, simply by feeling the temperature that you perceive in the body at this moment. Whether there's coolness or warmth, maybe you're feeling cold or hot. So just noticing the temperature in the body at this moment. And perhaps you're aware of the breath flowing through the body and connecting in this way to the air element that makes up this body. Just a gentle flow of the breath in and out. The aliveness of the body, the aliveness of the breath. Air flowing in and out. This body with all its different activities that go on every single second inside of us without us even knowing about it most of the time. or having any control over it. Just the body doing its thing. And we can walk it and feed it and jog it, and still, ultimately, we have to surrender to the body and its own laws. So we can realize that this is not me, this is not mine, this is not myself. A body who might sicken at any time, a body who will definitely continue to age, and a body that will one day, sooner or later, cease to exist, will die. Bhikkhu Analayo, who's a long-standing German monk who has translated many suttas, reminds us to reflect on the fact that this could be our last breath. So sometimes when you're drowsy or lethargic in meditation, this might be a good mantra to practice with. This could be my last breath. And it's not to scare us or to make us feel hopeful or hopeless, but rather to help us feel a sense of gratitude for being alive in this moment, for feeling a sense of urgency, of practicing as best as we can to understand the nature of the body, to understand the nature of life, and to come to a place of peace with it. And perhaps being aware of what emotions that might stir up in you, the reality of sickness, aging, and death, the reality that we really don't have any say over our bodies, over our feelings. And just notice now as you're sitting here what it's feeling like in the body and mind. Is there a sense of pleasantness or unpleasantness, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant? So see if you can take the remainder of the time to perhaps inquire a little bit into the relationship between dukkha and non-self, between suffering and non-self. How are they related with one another? And if you feel like you've gone too much into your head, sometimes to just drop back into the body and experience, and just maybe asking yourself, what is this? Whatever you're experiencing, but keeping the experience and the inquiry in the body. What is this that is arising right now? Is it me? Is it mine? Is it myself? Is this experience that I'm having, that I'm calling myself, the body and the feelings and the sensations? Can I rely on them to be there tomorrow in the same way? Can I rely on them to endure? And my first Buddhist teacher, Master Yin, always said that impermanence doesn't just have a negative connotation. It can also mean that if you're in a lot of pain now, a lot of physical or mental suffering, that also isn't permanent. That also cannot be relied on to be here or to last in any way, shape, or form. Maybe take a moment to reflect on all the ways that you're trying to make life secure for yourself, to make it solid and lasting, reliable, give you a sense of security. All the ways that you're striving to make your experience safe and pleasurable. Do you really have any ground to walk on? Can you really control anything? If this is not me, mine, and myself, is there suffering? So out of this flow, since everything is really not determined and can switch around, I have now decided to read the sutta to you while you're still in a state of meditation, rather than reading it together. So just stay in your meditation posture and take in the words of the Buddha from 2,600 years ago, his teaching on non-self. Thus it was heard by me. At one time, the Blessed One was living in the deer park of Isipatana near Benares. There indeed, the Blessed One addressed a group of 5 monks. Form, O monks, is not self. If form were self, then form would not lead to affliction, and it should obtain regarding form. May my form be thus, may my form not be thus. And indeed, O monks, since my form is not self, therefore form leads to affliction, and it does not obtain regarding form. May my form be thus, may my form not be thus. Feeling, O monks, is not self. If feeling were self, then feeling would not lead to affliction, and it should obtain regarding feeling. May my feeling be thus, may my feeling not be thus. And indeed, O monks, since feeling is not self, therefore feeling leads to affliction, and it does not obtain regarding feeling. May my feeling be thus, may my feeling not be thus. Perception, O monks, is not self. If perception were self, then perception would not lead to affliction, and it should obtain regarding perception. May my perception be thus, may my perception not be thus. And indeed, O monks, since perception is not self, therefore perception leads to affliction, and it does not obtain regarding perception. May my perception be thus, may my perception not be thus. Mental formations, O monks, are not self. If mental formations were self, then mental formations would not lead to affliction, and it should obtain regarding mental formations. May my perception be thus, may my mental formations be thus, may my mental formations not be thus. And indeed, O monks, since mental formations are not self, therefore mental formations lead to affliction, and it does not obtain regarding mental formations. May my mental formations be thus, may my mental formations not be thus. Consciousness, O monks, is not self. If consciousness were self, then consciousness would not lead to affliction, and it should obtain regarding consciousness. May my consciousness be thus, may my consciousness not be thus. And indeed, O monks, since consciousness is not self, therefore consciousness leads to affliction, and it does not obtain regarding consciousness. May my consciousness be thus, may my consciousness not be thus. What do you think of this, O monks? Is form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, O Lord. Now, that which is impermanent, is it unsatisfactory or satisfactory? Unsatisfactory, O Lord. Now, that which is impermanent, unsatisfactory, subject to change, is it proper to regard that as, this is mine, this I am, this is myself? Indeed, not that, O Lord. What do you think of this, O monks? Is feeling permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, O Lord. Now, that which is impermanent, is it unsatisfactory or satisfactory? Unsatisfactory, O Lord. Now that which is impermanent, unsatisfactory, subject to change, is it proper to regard that as this is mine, this I am, this is myself? Indeed, not that, O Lord. What do you think of this, O monks? Is perception permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, O Lord. Now, what is impermanent? Is it unsatisfactory or satisfactory? Unsatisfactory, O Lord. Now, that which is impermanent, unsatisfactory, subject to change, is it proper to regard that as this is mine, this I am, this is myself? Indeed, not that, O Lord. What do you think of this, O monks? Are mental formations permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, O Lord. Now, those that are impermanent, are they unsatisfactory or satisfactory? Unsatisfactory, O Lord. Now, those that are impermanent, unsatisfactory, subject to change, is it proper to regard them as they are mine, this I am, this is myself? Indeed, not that, O Lord. Now, what do you think of this, O monks? Is consciousness permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, O Lord. Now, what is impermanent? Is that unsatisfactory or satisfactory? Unsatisfactory, O Lord. Now, what is impermanent, unsatisfactory, subject to change, is it proper to regard it as this is mine, this I am, this is myself? Indeed, not that, O Lord. Therefore, surely, O monks, whatever form, past, future, or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, low or lofty, far or near, all that form must be regarded with proper wisdom according to reality thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Therefore, surely, O monks, whatever feeling, past, future, or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, low or lofty, far or near, all that feeling must be regarded with proper wisdom according to reality thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Therefore, surely, O monks, whatever perception, past, future, or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, low or lofty, far or near, all that perception must be regarded with proper wisdom according to reality thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Therefore, surely, O monks, whatever mental formations, past, future, or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, low or lofty, far or near, all those mental formations must be regarded with proper wisdom according to reality thus: these are not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Therefore, surely, O monks, whatever consciousness, past, future, or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, low or lofty, far or near, all that consciousness must be regarded with proper wisdom according to reality thus: this is not mine, this is I am not, this is not myself. O monks, the well-instructed noble disciple, seeing thus, gets wearied of form, gets wearied of feeling, gets wearied of perception, gets wearied of mental formation, gets wearied of consciousness. Being wearied, he becomes passion-free. In his freedom from passion, he is emancipated. Being emancipated, there is the knowledge that she is emancipated. She knows birth is exhausted, lived is the holy life. What had to be done is done. There is nothing more of this becoming. This the Blessed One said. Pleased, the group of 5 monks were delighted with the exposition of the Blessed One. Moreover, As this exposition was being spoken, the minds of the group of 5 monks were freed of defilements without attachment. Indeed, at that time, there were 6 arhants in the world.